Synergetic Journal, February 1st through February 2nd, 2026. Anticipating Omnirational Democracy's Equanimity on Earth. Episode 5. Christina Herlofson's Synergetics Research Project. From centuries of relative ignorance that attempts controlling humanity's potential cognition and recognition of inherently integral conceptual freedoms, by ambitiously self-serving, self-other invalidating educations that inadvertently promote stultifying reactions, fooling the individual human psyche's personality to adjust its intellection, choosing from a selection of emulating traits and characterizations in the human condition, to counterbalance the authority that seems always to rise to positions of fear engendering that become more accurately describable when metaphysical intellect intuitively finds what may be the only system to end this unconscionably devised power cycle. The only system to end this power cycle is Synergetics, Explorations in the Geometry of Thinking by R. Buckminster Fuller, who discovered nature's coordinate system and what may turn out to be the long-awaited news of a unified field because of its operationally transformable complex of symmetrical forms, quantum modules, and tetravolumes we can consider in Synergetics 982.61 and shown in Synergetics color plate number 9. Regardless of any migration and immigration, as human populations traverse the Earth's land and seas, the unconscionable devised power cycle that manifests in the human condition is derived from false premises in manifest forms over centuries as humans adapt and adopt coping methods as a way of dealing with the persuasive mindsets that can be described by the PRJWBCHM acronym. Its letters in the English language represent the reenacting articulations as interrelated, interdependent, interfering, intimidating, invalidating contextual parameters of politics, religion, justice, war, belief, complexes, hierarchical matrix. Perhaps as one step in the Synergetics informed communication process, when consciously mindful of reducing the tolerance magnitudes of the PRJWBCHM reenacting articulations, our tuned-in 21st century generations can select words starting with the prefixes omni, inter, from the Synergetics dictionary that uncommonly clarify what may fit into the anticipatory design science UIVMOFCH, universe, isotropic, vector matrix, operational field, cosmic, hierarchy, conceptuality, along with omni-circumferential, omni-closest packing, omni-coexisting, omni-coherent, omni-concurrent, omni-condition, omni-congruent, omni-considerate, omni-continuous, omni-convergent, omni-convertex, omni-co-occurring, omni-coordinate, omni-curvilinear, omni-deployed patterns. This does not require AI robots to displace human intellection as the worst supplanting solution that also derives from monetary profit motivations and all else that takes our humanity further off an omnirationally directed course into potentially brain-draining human conditions. Instead, and naturally, it requires a research writer's generalized content in purposeful compositions for world-around dissemination that coincide with observing the interrelated, interdependent, interfering, intimidating, invalidating human scenarios. Examples of the omni-inter words are omni-inter-accelerating, omni-inter-accommodative, omni-interacting, omni-interactive, omni-interactions, omni-interaltering, omni-interbetween, omni-intercomplementation, omni-intercoordination, omni-interdependence, omni-intereffective, omni-interfering, omni-intermeshed, omni-interorderliness, omni-interpulsative, omni-interrelationships, omni-interrelevant, omni-interresonated, omni-intertangency, omni-intertransformable, omni-intertransformabilities, omni-intertriangulated. It is from the energy events in human event scenarios that the reenacting articulations nestle in as a compatible communication environment for all the reasons that can rationalize the purpose of it, which, for the most part, typically is satisfied to amass a following of believers and or subscribers who are temporarily lost in the bewilderment, but can experience moments of exaltation in the superficial compatibility. Superficial, because on the surface there is a momentary agreement, but without the depth of consideration that is experienced when intellect is informed of generalizing concepts with the minimum structural system of metaphysical universe in one's integral conceptual field that is independent of size, time, space, sizing, where size alone can come to zero, not the conceptuality of the system under consideration. In the most self-suffered attempt to describe the authority making us fools, to the detriment of each subsequent generation of humans on Earth, as a type of victimization, we can be momentarily satisfied with such a self-description. Nevertheless, this punitive fear-engendering is closely associated with monetary exploitations. Profiting motivating problems continues as emulation of some previous survival strategy mistakenly prevails. Whether admitted or denied, everything in the energy-derived environments, human condition depends only on explored, trial and error, experiential, experimental information processing, survival stratagems, and conscious awareness of universe's eternally conserved energy. The eternally conserved energy is conceptual, as the topological characteristics describe the constant relative abundance of lines, areas, corners that refer one's thought to the minimum structural system of universe that anyone can conceptualize. Once its individual metaphysical intellect is informed of the tetrahedral configuration, to eventually associate it with the vector equilibrium, octahedron, and icosahedron, the prime systems of self-regenerative universe, in quotes. The vector equilibrium is the zero starting point for happenings or non-happenings, end quote. It is not a structure, but a system in its own right. Synergetics 503.03 informs us of the vector equilibrium as the empty theater, an empty circus, and empty universe. Surely, if ever our humanity required an empty theater to accommodate any act in any audience that are not some emulated versions of an as yet to be resolved PRJWBCHM detrimental human conditions, where the personality characteristics abound for adopting to it as an offsetting inducement that humors or vexes hierarchies authorities. It is now or never, rarely, if ever, do humans anywhere in the world refer to the geometry of their thinking, not consciously considering thoughts as systems, nor identifying the minimum structural system and the conceptual variables involved in realizing correlations between the essential brain-mind processing interaccommodations, including consciously coordinating gathered, sorted, stored, and restored information. We can learn from Synergetics 1052.58 that awareness of the physical phenomena gives the metaphysical employment to apply its extraordinary sorting capabilities. Which is it? The brain sorting or the metaphysical intellect's conceptual and reasoning aptitude as a function of the omnidirectional, omnirational, omnicontinuous? Most of us do not yet know about the geometry of thinking, but many of us are in the process of learning of this essential problem-solving phenomena from R. Buckminster Fuller's Synergetics, Bucky Fuller's Synergetics, in quotes. There is no geometry of space, only of local aggregates of principles of special cases, end quote. The special cases are always physical, time, size, weighable, can move a needle, whereas the metaphysical, metaphysical are always sizeless, timeless, eternal, and conceptualizable by metaphysical intellect's generalized conceptioning in fields of thought. In RBF Synergetics 419.02, when using his rubber glove model, turning it inside out from one hand to the other, we do not initially decipher what Bucky's geometer personality and psyche discovered that can always be more exquisite even when it concerns the systems we depend on for comprehensively governing without having to settle for those detrimental emulations that continue to hang on for dear life, but in any event require conceptual models and informed awareness of the fundamental complementation of macro tetra and micro tetra, while recalling that the tetrahedron is the minimum structural system of universe. The gathered information is from the environment. It can be cosmic to local, in quotes. A system is a local phenomenon in the universe, end quote. It can be macro to micro or micro to macro in any event, in quotes. Local is continually subdivisible, end quote. Its generalized patterning integrity via the observer's thoughts and thinking goes directly to the brain's neurons, the specialized cell-transmitting nerve impulse, along axons toward specifically designed areas of the brain that correspond with whatever the human psyche's personality and its anatomical system's reactions are to what is transmitted thus. Rudimentary awareness can easily call the sensed environment entirely physical, and the mind that employs the brain metaphysical, thereby using these wholly WHOLLY relevant terms in conjunction with a recollected memory of, in quotes, U equal MP, universe equal metaphysical times physical, from Synergetics 162, recalling, changing the spelling of the word metaphysical to metaphysical because the P from the physical does not belong in the metaphysical. This cannot happen without the human mind's metaphysical conceptioning and awareness of its comprehensively operating tuned-in propensities when the observed environmental event is generalized to its smallest size. During consciously coordinated thought language in every aspect of local problem solving, respecting interpersonal communication and all forms of communication, which is said to be continuous. Omnicontinuous involves awareness of the human brain, as the observer does not see wavelength space. The wavelength space is infratunable by the human brain's apprehending set of 200 info bits per inch that appears thus as a point-tuable something or other, despite the separate frequency islands, Synergetics 260.22. Like events and no events, all the visible spots of light are frequency islands, as we barely cognize the idea of it before recognizing the importance of exploring whatever impinges on our nervous system, which is all manner of frequencies, as most of us, myself included, have yet to grasp what frequencies are correlatively to systemic thought's consciously coordinated concerns regarding, in quotes, frequency as a multi-cyclic fractionation of unity, end quote. It is when a minimum of 2 cycles is essential to frequency fractionation, and what we identify geometrically with relative frequency modulation. This must be where the only 2 covariables, modification of angles and frequencies, that are operatives in all universe design may have something to do with the lag rates between apprehension and comprehension when the degrees of freedom come into metaphysical intellect's generalized conceptioning fields of thought. To learn of these covariables and some connection to the computer, and realizing the human brain is a computer, informed metaphysical intellect is happy to know of the only 2 possible covariables that are operatives in all universe design from R. Buckminster Fuller. Those covariables are modifications of angles and frequencies which are potentially operative, suggesting to the lay mentality, self-educating curiosity and interest in solving critical problems that there must be an operational field complex to which these modifications of angles and frequencies apply, and cosmologically is subsequent to learning of an operational field complex, coincidentally to recalling operation equal realized, or words to this effect. One surprised of the minimum structural system of metaphysical physical universe, taking the liberty to change the spelling of the word metaphysical, which happens to be the tetrahedron. It seems impossible to dismiss this system awareness whenever observing the reenacting articulations that require one's individual mind and brain. This awareness ought to be common knowledge applicably to all aspects of the universal communication process between self and others? If so, then conscionable intellect can confidently inform others of this natural phenomenon. However, we must not be surprised to experience others who are deeply entrenched in personalized political, religion, justice, war, belief complexes, hierarchical matrix, individualized personality profiles, readily objecting to metaphysical intellect's evolving clarity. Of course, the opposing fixation resets its unconscionable self-other invalidations without yet identifying those interrelated factors as the PRJWBCHM, while referring to the governmental system as if it is wholly WHOLLY constituted of human constituents, with variously designated powers as elected officials to control events in the human condition, all of which occur in the environment, which cannot be excluded from omnirational conscious thought, but is more often than not. As if our species, humans of a mind, can do anything without the environment, which we learn in Synergetics is the total complex of otherness. And in Synergetics 100.010 through .012, in quotes, awareness equals self plus otherness, and awareness equal observer plus the observed, end quote. Gratefully, it feels relatively comfortable and self-assuring and self-other validating to identify self in universe that to each of us must be all that is, including the observer who is me, as the environment must be all that is, accepting the individual observer known to me, myself, as me. Perhaps news of this awareness of the child from Synergetics during the first 3 decades of the 21st century got confused, as some people went crazy with pronoun identification, trying to make the personalized pronoun fit the complicated sociological, political, human event scenarios for self-validation as an individual. But that veered off into positions of defending one's right to be identified by the pronoun, instead of as a physical system that is wholly WHOLLY constituted of subsystems, including the atoms, in a far more exquisite relative proximity to the molecules we can read about in Synergetics 1024.19 through 1024.22. Until next time, gratefully, faithfully, eternally, Christina Herlofson.